Seconded, Gary.
Any questions or comments? And I'm on my phone, so I have to scroll to see you guys. So if somebody's raising their hand and I don't see them, can someone else let me know? Any questions or comments? Okay, not hearing anyone. All those in favor? Gary?
Approve.
Tom? Did he say approved?
Oh, approve. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you now. Aaron?
Approved.
Darcy?
Approved.
Jennifer? Approved. So moved. Okay, public comments. I have 2 letters. Mark, do you have anything?
Aside from what you may have, Jennifer, I just double check with Selena, but if there's anything in addition to what you've received, we'll provide it to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The first letter I'm going to read is from Alice Young. She wrote, "Good morning. Whereas education for our children has suffered due to lack of attendance or disjointed attendance, I want to suggest that the TES consider mandating children attend school year-round in order to bring them up to grade level. I know that this suggestion will not be met with enthusiasm, but I do feel we need to make some changes to address the loss of education since COVID. We do not address this issue now, society will end up addressing it in the future. Children lacking in the skills necessary to succeed will not be able to provide for themselves. Our children are our future. Sincerely, Alice Young." And the second letter that I have to read, to the board members. As a former student of Trenton and MDI, I would greatly urge the town of Trenton to remain with AOS 91. The fundamentals provided to students of MDI school district encourage our children to become entrepreneurs and leaders. I do not feel that other school districts in this area provide the caliber education that MDI does. That being said, it would affect future population of Trenton. I know my husband and I acquired land in Trenton with the thought of MDI being the school for our future children would go to. If that is no longer the case, we will have to consider looking elsewhere for us to plant our roots. We would rather pay higher taxes to ensure fantastic education for our children and those of the children within our community. Though this may be difficult for some families in town, growth and accessibility to one of the best school districts in the state will only put their children ahead of students from other districts. Investing in our children today will allow for more prosperous tomorrow. Thank you for your consideration, Heather Goff. Goff, if I'm saying it wrong.
I think it's Goff.
Goff?
Goff, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, principal's report.
Good evening, everybody. So I'll just share a couple highlights and a piece that I had to add to the report since I sent it to you on the 2nd of February. When it comes to enrollment, we're steady at the total of 191 students, and that includes our kids that are both Ellsworth High School and MDI High School. I did want to share in staffing updates. As you know from the last report, we had a ed tech resign. I am still sort of working on replacing that position. Right now we have people who are subbing and filling in, just looking for the right person, and I may wait until the spring to reopen that position if my pool isn't satisfactory. Also, I wanted to report, and sadly, that our head custodian, Kim Colbeth, is moving on. She's going to Brooksville on a new adventure. It's a smaller school, and she reported to me that she's moving up in years, and she's looking to her future and just wants something a little bit smaller. And what's interesting is she actually sort of early on in her career, she was at that school. So sort of like a coming home for her, but she will be sadly missed. She struggled today with, words from folks here. But I think it's, it's the right thing for her, and it's important for us to support people. So I have already put an ad out for a new head custodian. It'll be in the paper, and it's on Serving Schools, and then it went out through our district. So I wanted to report to that to you all. The transition, I want to talk about the transition to back to in-person learning after the, the holiday, and just, how smooth that was. And I think all that planning that we have done as a district and in individual schools to lay out what that process looks like, how to go into remote and how to return, just made it a little bit more seamless in terms of when the kids were back in school, just sort of moving right along. And so I'm just really impressed with the process and the fact that, parents had a lot of stuff that they had to get back to school of the bags, and kids were wandering in with everything over a shoulder and waddling on in with everything. And so, that was a Herculean effort. So I appreciate parents making sure they collected everything for coming back to school. As I shared, last month when we had to make this switch to our new second semester, we had 2 students leave the virtual academy and come back to school. We were able to make a tweak to the 5th grade classroom with the new desks that we purchased to make it so that we could fit everybody, and a little furniture, some rearranging. And then in the 8th grade and the 6th grade, we actually flopped rooms because the 8th grade classroom, square footage wise, was larger than the 6th grade classroom, and they had fewer students, and we were getting 2 more students. Someone who moved in, and then someone who moved from the virtual academy back to school. And that process went really smoothly. I'm still getting confused when I walk by a room and I want to go into the 6th grade and I find myself in the 8th grade. But I'm learning. And the kids, did a great job, being able to switch. Report cards went out. They went out a couple of days later than we thought, just because of some technical glitches with Power School. You can imagine that trying to have teachers where kids are enrolled in the Trenton school, they're also enrolled in the virtual academy, and they're being taught by teachers from across the district. That could be a little complicated within that system, but the office did a great job working that out, and it took us a little while to get some tweaks to make that happen seamlessly. Transition to high school, believe it or not, is happening. And we had representatives from MDI here. We had a call last week in setting up time for Ellsworth High School to be here as well. So, and all of it is happening through remote meetings. And actually in the newsletter, the MDI open house there, what that's going to look like will be in the newsletter for this coming week. And I haven't heard from Dan at Ellsworth what their process is, but as soon as that's here, that will be in the newsletter as well. I don't know if you noticed, for the Timberwolf Community Cupboard, we have a new little sign that was made for the side of that. And we had a little, not like an advertisement, but it's sort of like a little advertisement that says, we're here every Thursday, 2:30 to 5. Everyone is welcome. It's free. Bring your own bag, wear a mask. And that's just been a wonderful addition that Snow Ross has helped through our farm to school work. Basketball has been going on since we came back. I think we have had a couple of games here that I've been able to watch. We are streaming them. And though I did ask Coach if he would do the commentary, like the assistant principal over at Connors Emerson is doing, he declined, though he is making sure that the score is, every time a score is made, that he reports the score. But we're able to stream that to parents because they can't come in and watch. And the mitigating factors are pretty impressive. The teams are on either side of the basketball court. They are separated 6 feet apart. They're all wearing their masks. They all have their individual water bottles that they're drinking from. There's no shared pieces. There is no initial jump ball to help mitigate with the distance. That's done with the flip of a coin, and then they start off that way. And so everything I've heard and have been able to watch, it's just been an important opportunity for kids to have that as part of their school, and that little bit of sense of normalcy. If folks want to have access to the live streams for any of the schools within the district, they can go to the athletics web pages of those schools. Our links are on the athletic page, and when you go down, Coach Johnson has made those available. So it's a sort of a live YouTube situation, sort of like for folks who are watching our meeting. for student recognition, I had an opportunity to, just for coverage wise, to be in the pre-K room when they come in the morning, and they have such an awesome little routine. And Sarah, our teacher, as soon as they walk in, things are set up on their table for what they have to do, some initial writing. Some of them are already forming their letters and doing their name correctly. Some are just getting that pencil grip down, but they all know what their task is when they come in, they do that. Then there's a question on the board where they have to sort of, answer sort of like a survey, and they share their feelings that way. And then they go to their circle, they grab a book from the book bins that they're able to look at, and they sit and they wait for their morning meeting there, and they take a look at their books. And it's just sort of a nice daily consistent process. And it's just that thing that we wanted here at the school to prepare kids for kindergarten. So it was just great to have that opportunity. So and they all had, regardless of where they were in their letter formation, they all had the grip on the pencil. And I wanted to thank, a couple of our ed techs. Like I said, we had to do some room switching to make it so we can have more kids in the 6th grade. And Kat Dow, Althea Turner, and Autumn Domain worked really hard to allow the teachers to work on their report cards and swap the rooms over for the teachers. So they had just the little details that make their room theirs when, they came in on that day that we had when we did the switch over. So, I appreciate them. I will get into the free and reduced lunch. I'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the budget time, but I put that in there for you all to see, but I'll talk about that when we go over the budget. And I think the last piece, I just talk a little bit more about Lana Plenty and the professional development that teachers are doing. Our school goal is working on culture. And as you recall from last year, teachers across the school were doing mindful minutes with students as a way of providing focus for them, which basically the mindful minute was just a quiet time focusing on the breathing. And we have learned from our work on the brain that ability to bring focus and attention helps in a wide variety of ways for students and their abilities to focus on their academics and behavior. And one of the things in terms of through the pandemic is we learned that to be able to teach that, our teachers have to be in sort of that right mind. So we have been working with Lana Plenty, formerly from the Mind Up curriculum people, and she is on our own. She's been working with our teachers in our last 3 meetings on, their ability to bring calm to their work. And starting tomorrow or Thursday at our common study, the leadership team is going to begin working with her on our school-wide social emotional learning plan and doing that with a leadership team. And then we'll be working on that together as a staff at our monthly staff meetings. So that process has been really well received by the teachers. And I think it just provides a little bit more ownership for spreading the social emotional learning and what skills teachers need and kids need to be effective learners, because you can't be sort of settled in yourself and do well academically. You sort of have to have that part first. And so it's really great to see the teachers excited about that. Yeah, and that's my report.
Jennifer, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
Thanks, Gary.
Any questions or comments on what Mike just reported? Okay, seeing none. Superintendent's report. Mark?
Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
I'd hate to count. I don't have that many fingers and toes to count the number of times we've all heard you're muted, right? Isn't that crazy? We've been doing this a long time. I always like to hear the principals' reports because it really puts a stamp on how difficult this work is and what a great job Mike and the teachers, the kids, and the entire staff are doing, and how much we can appreciate the support of our communities. It's a tough time for everyone, and whether it be professionally or personally, I just want to acknowledge it's been a long haul. for all of us, and that the support we get from our communities is incredible. And our kids and staff are rising to the occasion. So thanks, Michael. I'll be brief, Jennifer, because I gave a pretty comprehensive overview last night at AOS board, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to take any, as always. I think it's important to note that we're coming up on a February break. And you know, this has been difficult for our families and for our staff and kids. We're getting a lot of questions, and I'll try to put it in a nutshell. There's really two sides on this, and there's people that want to know, hey, how can we continue to be safe, which is a great thing, and what can I do and what can't I do? And so I think at the end of the day, people just need to know we've been working really hard with our families, our staff, our nurses, and that just we're following the CDC and the MDOE guidelines. And so it's on our website. We've given it to parents, community members. It's on the Gov website. But if you have a question, just call our school, talk to our nurse. We're all on the same page. And I in a nutshell, unnecessary travel, we're discouraging it, as is the state, but we don't mandate that. Quarantine, we're following CDC and DOE guidelines, and as similar to testing. So that's where we're at. We've had questions about, should we be doing activities? Do we want to restrict or go beyond that, those guidelines? And the short answer is no. We know that we're following our guidelines. We're seeing success with that. That's a credit to our kids and our staff. So that's where we're at with that piece. But it's fluid. It's dynamic, and it can change daily. The next piece is vaccines. We do not control vaccines. The schools don't. We're working very closely with our colleagues on the task force and the hospital. Incredible support there. But we've made surveys available to all of our staff. So if they chose to register, they're registered. And we don't determine tiers on who gets vaccinated, when, or any of that. That's not the school's purview. We can't vaccinate students. That's just not available. And we also can't vaccinate folks that are like coaches or assistants or volunteers or family members. So that's important to know. And the tiering is not set by the hospital. It's not set by the superintendent, the district. That is done through the state and above. I suspect when a vaccine is available, I know we'll be ready to roll instantly. But when a vaccine's available, it's probably not going to be everyone en masse. It'll probably be in chunks or by schools or cohorts. We also know that the second round of the vaccine, we're going to need to really be strategic and tier that, because some folks do have some effects on that, and we want to make sure that we can account for that. So we're working really closely with the hospital on that. The other piece that's been really important, it's been an invaluable tool, we've been so blessed, is our asymptomatic testing, which really is just a resource that many schools around us don't have, that gives us a benchmark to know whether or not we see evidence of any community spread or COVID in our schools. And knock on wood, we've been very lucky to have that resource. It's something that I know, talking to superintendents around the state, they would love to have it. We're planning for it next year. And yes, the short answer is we should be planning for it next year, just like any insurance, because we have to assume that what we're doing now is what we'll be doing in the fall. We hope that's not the case. And so we need all the tools and resources we can to keep our kids, our staff safe, and keep people keep people in schools. So I think the other thing I just want to acknowledge is that, as I said last night, we had an unfortunate incident. It didn't involve the Trenton school, but they're a valued member of our district. And we had an incident of hate speech that was posted. And so this is an opportunity just to let folks know that very uncertain times, or not let folks know, but to acknowledge they're very uncertain times of unrest. Our kids are looking to us all the time. as to what we model, what we believe. There's a lot of turmoil in the world for a lot of reasons, social, emotional, who knows. But, you know, it's an opportunity, and I'm really encouraged to see people unite. And I think the word that I've been really encouraged by that's been suggested to me is civility. And I hope we can continue to go down that road where we're all living in the great state of Maine. We're all Americans, and it's time for us to come together. So thank you, Jennifer. That's my report.
Thank you, Mark. Anybody have any questions or comments on his report? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mark. Now is the response to the school evaluation committee. Okay, I'll read it to you, but it will be posted on the AOS website as well as the Trenton website, so it's available to everybody. And this letter was formed based on work done by board members. And after I read this, then Tom will go into that process. Okay. Trenton School Board's response to the SEOC recommendations letter. The Trenton School Board thanks the members of the SEOC for their year-long work at looking at ways to tackle rising costs. This letter is respectfully submitted as a response to the SEOC recommendations to the school board dated December 30th, 2020, January 11th, 2021, and January 22nd, 2021. A brief history. Membership in the AOS was driven in part by the drive for school consolidation from the Baldacci administration, as well as the fact that Trenton School had been part of Union School 92. Board members at the time did not feel that being part of Union 92 met the needs of the majority of the Trenton students because they chose to attend MDI High School. When questioning who to partner with, the Commissioner of Education called MDI RSS, or Union 98, as it was organized at the time, the gold standard. By joining the AOS, Trenton secured access to multiple community partners, which include the Jackson Lab, the MDI Bio Lab, the MDI Hospital, Acadia National Park, the Abbey Museum, College of Atlantic, Islands Readers and Writers, Seal Cove Auto Museum, Camp Beechcliff, and many others. This collaborative is unique to MDIRSS and the students and teachers it serves. These partnerships provide programming, resources, and unparalleled support not found in many other public pre-K to 12 school systems in the state of Maine. They provide pathways, resources, and educational opportunities that significantly augment the teaching and learning taking place at Trenton Elementary School. Autonomy. It is suggested that being part of the AOS, the Trenton School Board does not have a voice. On the contrary, Trenton is an equal member of the AOS. Votes are based on student enrollment. Bar Harbor has 4, Trenton and the other towns each have 3, and the outer islands each have 1. Furthermore, Trenton representatives to the AOS have served as the chair and the vice chair for 7 years, over half of the AOS's original 12-year existence. Clearly, the assertion that Trenton has no voice is merely an unfounded soundbite rather than the truth. The reality does not match the characterizations within the SEOC recommendations. Furthermore, as observed at the January 12th draft budget review, the Trenton School has complete control over the budget and directs school administration to make adjustments as it sees fit with professional guidance from the AOS central office. Comparisons. In comparing central office costs, Trenton pays $52,038 less than Lemoyne, and that is from the fiscal year 2020/2021 budgets. Trenton pays less for more services. If we were to join with Lemoyne and Hancock, for example, we would conceivably pay more for fewer services, which would negatively impact teaching and learning. Currently, the AOS salary scale closely matches what Lemoyne is using. Differences in regular instruction costs are in part born out of the large number of teachers at the top of the scale in Trenton as compared to other schools, example Lemoyne. Trenton has more teachers and specifically more specials teachers than in Lemoyne. Future growth concerns, efficiencies, RSU. Clearly, as the straw poll on the middle school question showed, people in the town of Trenton want to be part of an organization that is looking for ways to better educate their children in its community and meet the challenge of growing population that may impact future space needs at the Trenton school. The SEOC has recommended that the board look for efficiencies. Just as withdrawal is an avenue, the question of forming an RSU should not be ruled out. Though this is not the intent of the AOS and would be disingenuous for the SEOC to leave that off the table if fiscal responsibility is the concern of the committee. Sections 1, responses. Throughout this process, the superintendent has sought out legal advice and recommendations or questions have been asked by the SEOC. Yet the superintendent has been criticized when he has done so to protect the town from legal liability. The SEOC makes the assumption that pulling out of negotiations on the AOS common contract will result in savings. Towns, though through local school boards, are bound to the current salary and benefit structure throughout the process. If an offer is made that is lower than is currently provided, you may find highly qualified teachers being poached by other district schools. This is a practice that made it difficult to maintain a highly qualified staff, which led to the creation of the common contract. The school board unanimously disagrees with the assertion that it is micromanaged by the superintendent. The board accepted clear advice that by charter, the SEOC would suggest pulling out of the AOS. Membership on the SEOC could be misconstrued as tacit acceptance of that option. The superintendent helped the school board members understand their obligation, and decision was made by the school board to act in an advisory role. A member of the school board was at nearly all of the SEOC was not at a loss regarding the school board's perspective. Seeking discussions with other district superintendents is not in the purview of the SEOC, as it does not represent the elected school board. Any superintendent would seek their own legal advice as to whether such conversations are appropriate, especially if they are not supported by the elected officials. The school board has complete confidence in the leadership of the superintendent, as reflected by the AOS board's unanimous vote to extend his contract by 5 years. The superintendent did his job to protect the town from legal challenges. It was prudent for Dr. Gauss to seek legal advice regarding withdrawal from the AOS or the Special Fund Education Reserve, as those provisions were voted on and passed by the citizens of the town. It would be irresponsible of him not to do that. In discussion regarding extracurricular activity dollars, all public documents drafted to show the potential impact of cuts were generated by the principal, Mike Zabore. To provide context to the impact of students' school experiences combined, all after-school programming costs are approximately $50,000. When a town does not have a passed school budget, it is prudent to not spend funds unnecessarily when it has not been authorized to do so by the voters. It is essential to be fiscally prudent during these times to protect those educationally necessary services, as your budget may not pass at the amount supported by the school board. In conclusion, in the current structure, the Trenton School Board fully supports its place in the AOS. Trenton School Board members have played a leading role in decision-making of the AOS in support of Trenton students, teachers, and community, thereby providing the best educational opportunity for the town. Trenton School Board and the AOS are both committed to finding savings. Clearly, the lion's share of the growth in Trenton budget has been in the area of special education, which comes with a legal mandate to address. This growth has led to a nearly $400,000 increase in the school budget over 4 years. The board appreciates citizen participation in looking for ways to provide the best education to the children of Trenton at a reasonable cost to the taxpayers. That process should take place without a preconceived conclusion in mind and should carefully weigh all possibilities. The citizens of Trenton have shown time and again that they value their quality of education provided to our students and consider the funding of quality education of our students an investment in the future for all of us. Respectfully, the Trenton School Board.
Madam Chair, if I may, at this time, I move that we accept the response as presented by the chairperson.
Okay, and seconded by?
Second. I'll second it.
And that's Darcy?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And any questions or comments? All those in favor? Gary,
Approve.
Darcy,
Approved.
Tom,
Approved.
Aaron,
Approved.
and Jennifer, I approve as well. And now, Tom, do you want to go through a little bit of how we came up with this response?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members of the board and Mike and Julie and I did research into the effects of withdrawal from the AOS and how those would affect our budget, affect the services that we offer, and anything else that came out. This document is typed up and will be available on the school and the AOS website as well, pending approval, obviously. In general, I don't want to read it verbatim because it's a 12-page document. But essentially, I looked into the history of the AOS formation and the services provided by the central office, and then examined the mechanism of withdrawal from the AOS and what effects would come from that. I then looked at the potential administrative impacts, specifically looking at the autonomy of Trenton Elementary as compared to it is now. And then I also, autonomy in terms of if we were an independent school or if we were to join another group of schools. I then looked at potentially budgetary impacts and using Lemoyne as a model because we are very similar in size and assessment value and number of students. And I looked at the differences in the school operations, the obligations and contract obligations that we have, also the special education obligations. And I looked at the administrative services that they provide and compared to the AOS provides to us and how they impact the budget. And essentially broad strokes, amid costs are higher in total dollars and as a percentage of the budget for Lemoyne. Lemoyne has a lower special education cost of about $350,000, and that's a pretty significant portion of the difference. The biggest portion is regular education, which is approximately $500,000 difference between the two schools. So I first looked at the faculty salary scale, excuse me, to see if any major differences could be seen there. With their new contract and comparing to our contract, the salary scale is actually very similar, within less than 10% of each other, pretty much across the board. We in Trenton, we have a higher percentage of teachers who are at the top of our scale, meaning that they have either more educational qualifications or they have longer experience in the school district. I can't, percentages are buried in here somewhere, but off the top of my head, I believe ours is approximately 2/3 are above the median, whereas Lemoyne's is around a half or a little less. The insurance costs, comparing between the two, it's kind of a mixed bag. Lemoyne pays more for singles. Trenton pays more for adults with families. Another actually, about 10% of that 500,000 difference is we offer pre-K and they do not. We also offer more in terms of specials, art, music, PE, language, tech, extra, and then also extra services like guidance and library. All of those equal more positions and more money to offer those services. So broad strokes, and again, the report goes into much more details on specific numbers to be looked at. But broad strokes is to reduce our budget, it would mean less services for students and families. There's really no other way around it. The admin costs have no effect comparing the two budgets. It's all about the services that Trenton provides. So then I then looked into the actual options provided by the SEOC that were specific to what the school board could do and the schools could do. They had many other options for raising funds and other things that are outside of the purview of the school in the report. And a lot of those are really great ideas. And I hope and encourage the town to continue to look into those. And I'm glad to help as well. Looking into the Southern Penobscot Regional Program for Children with Exceptionalities, Spruce, whatever. Mr. Z spent time looking into the costs associated with it and the logistics, a broad view of the logistics of how to get our students to there. And essentially comes out, it would cost about $16,000 more per student, per individual than currently what we get through Kids Piece. A lot of that is transportation, and that is also assuming parents can get their children to Bucksport rather than ride a bus that's already going there. If they can't, then the transportation costs are even higher. We also looked into negotiating healthcare costs, and a lot of that's tied to collective bargaining. So there is no guarantee on it, but as a group, the AOS has worked to lower healthcare cost increases compared to what they would be. First of all, by being a larger group, also by increasing the cost share that the teachers have to pay. That has gone from 85/15 to 82/18 over the years. Also, we've switched plans to reduce the cost and also offered a buyout for individuals who can be on spouses plans, which encourages them to be off of the school's plan and onto their spouse's plan, which again lowers the cost, equating to a pretty significant savings per individual. Another suggestion was billing to main care for services for special education. And research into it shows that yes, money can be obtained from that, but it is a net negative when you factor in the cost to do the paperwork. As an example, if you look at Bangor, who has a $9.27 million sped budget, they budget approximately $100,000 for reimbursements out of $9.2 million. Simple math on the back of an envelope, it's about $11,000 that we could receive from that, and we would have to pay someone to do that. Ed techs currently cost a lot more than $11,000, and there is no capacity to have someone else do that. There is potential to combine those services across the AOS, and the more schools that you have doing it could potentially lead to the actual gross positive or net positive. So I think that is something that we should look into across the AOS, but I believe that it is nothing but a loser if Trenton tried to take it on itself. Finally, we looked at exploring ways to consolidate costs and share staff. We have done a lot through AOS, including the health insurance above, heating costs, bus contracts with Commerce Anderson. We consolidated our bid there. We share tech staff and world language teachers. The Long Range Planning Steering Committee and other subcommittees have looked at other ways to combine positions, including art, music, and language, custodial, education tech, food service, special education and gifted and talented, technology services, and transportation across AOS. Those all can yield substantial benefits if we can make it work. There are also other ones that I've researched from other schools, centralizing bulk purchasing, to forming an RSU, which could save money. We should look and see if that is actually, you could save money. And if it can save money, then present it to the voters to get their opinion on it. So again, this document will be on the website if it's approved. And I would ask everyone in Trenton to look at it, and please send public comment if you have any comments on the contents of it.
Thank you very much, Tom. Are there any questions or comments?
No, I move to approve the report and make it public.
That was Gary, seconded by
Aaron.
Aaron. All those in favor? Gary?
Approved.
Madam Chair, excuse me.
Yes?
Before you go to vote, you just need to check for discussion. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, sorry about that. Yep. Any questions or comments? Okay, well, I think I've been through all the, okay. Gary,
Approve.
Tom,
Approve.
Aaron,
Approve.
Darcy,
Approved.
and Jennifer approved. So those two things that were just read, or what Tom was speaking of and what I read, will be on the Trenton school website as well as the AOS website. I see when I scroll through here, we have Sue Starr and Sue Sargent from the SEOC committee. And I just wanted to offer, if you had any comments or any questions or anything.
No.
Okay. And I'm just
wanna say
scrolling to find.
Thank you for your response. Sorry, but I have the hiccups. I'm a got a little air in me. Anyways, thank you for your response. And I appreciate you getting back to us and posting it in writing somewhere so we can have a copy of it. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you for all of the hard work that, you guys put into, your report and, your year or a little longer than a year's worth of, work. It's a lot of work that you guys did. We
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is the 22 budget.
Jennifer, may I speak?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Regarding the budget, there's been some adjustments, but I just want to take an opportunity not to belabor the point, but we're so fortunate to have Nancy, through this all, guiding us, making recommendations, and just, it's important for everybody to know out there that she's doing this 11 times. And in addition to those 11 times, she's now doing it almost 22 times with CRF funds. So Nancy, thank you for all you do, you and your staff. And the other piece is I just want to report some good news that Michael will get into the budget that, it's a process, and this is something the school committee starts in the early fall. And I'm glad that there are people that want to join in doing this, but we had a breakthrough today. Julie Meltzer, Dr. Meltzer led a discussion with our principals, and we're really fortunate that we were able to take something out of the budget, not just for Trenton, for other schools. And I think it's a pathway forward for us to consider. It doesn't have to be that we all march blindly into the sun, but there are efficiencies. Tom pointed out some, but in short, we can take the technology request, which is very, very needed, out of the Trenton budget, because we're going to be able to use federal funding because of the collaboration of the principals and support that need without having to go to our local budget. And that's true of Trenton. It's true in part of Mount Desert, and it's true also of Pematic. But all of our principals collaborated, and that's the sort of path forward I think we can look at. And I'm encouraged that there are other programs that we may not have in this budget cycle, but I think that we could consider. With that, there's also some challenges that we have to navigate, some that are well known in special education, but some that have emerged as part of what our preliminary projections are for our state aid, our general purpose aid. As always, budgets are going to be a challenge. And I think I would just say, before turning it over to Michael and Nancy, that I'm struck by the fact that I'm aware of the balance that we need to maintain to allow our families to stay in their homes, but also support the educational needs of our students and the benefits of collaboration. It's a fine line, and it's different, and it ebbs and flows in each of our communities. But as superintendent, I take that responsibility very seriously. It's a privilege. It's not a right. And I think what makes our process better is having good people come in and question things. But I think our path forward, again, is by conversation, collaboration, and really working with all of our member communities. The AOS, I've come to know, is a very unique structure. And never now more than ever have we seen the challenges of what an AOS is. And costs are going to continue to rise. That's whether we're talking about public education or other entities. There are always efficiencies, but what you folks have here, and I'm privileged to be a part of now, is very, very special. It is, in part, in this region and in the state of Maine. And kids are getting a world-class education. And I hope we can just continue to afford that. So there are some adjustments to the budget, but there are some challenges. And I look forward to being able to have the opportunity to navigate those with you. So I'd like to turn it over to Michael with your permission. And
Thank you, Mark.
thanks.
Thank you. Mike, floor is yours.
All right, I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully that'll go well. And I have the, just for members know, I have the school budget cost center review, and then we'll sort of go over that. And within that, I'll share some information about the state subsidy, which came in much lower, and I'll be able to talk a little bit about that and why that was, and that'll lead me into free and reduced lunch. And then I'll go through some of the cost savings that Nancy and I did last week to come up with the budget for the second draft. And Josh, it looks like you have to enable share my.
Josh, Mike, if he doesn't kick you on, I'll just text him.
Okay.
Hang on. You need to share the screen, Mike?
Got it.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so can everybody see? Is it big enough? I can make it a little bit bigger. All right, so I'd like to start with taking a look at the state subsidy, and this is something different from what we saw in our last budget. If you recall, and looking at the bottom, the 2021-2022 budget, we had anticipated 400,000, and that was before what we got from the state. And as you can look there, we received our number from the state, and we're receiving just under 300,000 in terms of our state subsidy. Now the question is, well, why is that? You look at the top of that state subsidy box, I have listed our free and reduced lunch and special education percentages. Part of what we get as a limited receiver is that we get funds for special education, and we get what's known as economically disadvantaged funds. And this year, for economically disadvantaged, our free and reduced numbers had to be 46% or above. And every year, at the beginning of the year, we ask parents to fill out the free and reduced lunch form. And for years, with that form, there was a letter that spoke about that this free and reduced lunch isn't only just about yourselves and the possibility of easing your mind about the food that you're having your children eat for breakfast or for lunch, and the ability to get that at a free or reduced rate, but also that puts the school in line for state funds as well as federal funds. And it's really important that people understand that. We try to get everyone to fill it out, even if you think they're not going to hit the target. You never know. And so that letter goes out, and both Stephanie here in the office and Teresa Gray worked diligently, and they did so this year in terms of sending applications home with students, sending them in self-addressed stamped envelopes. leaving phone messages, and then doing the online piece that I did in the newsletters with a description that, hey, it's not just about free and reduced lunch. There's also other opportunities it provides the school if the majority of people fill this out. So in our count in October, which is what the state basis is on, our free and reduced lunch count was at 32%. Now, COVID sort of has played a role in this, as it has done with our carryover, and we talked about that over the last 2 meetings. And what has happened is we had a large number of graders leave for the high school.
I'm sorry, Mike. I'm having real trouble hearing you. Can someone who's not muted, can you mute, please? I'm getting an echo.
Yep. If everybody can mute other than me, that would be great, and then that echo won't happen. All right, sounds good, Tom? You could nod. So, like I said, in terms of the transitions that we had around COVID, that had played sort of a large role. And we had 8 students move on to the high school. And usually with our incoming group with pre-K, there's at least 6 in terms of Head Start that we know we can sort of count on there. But because of COVID, we did not have, we had 16 students wanting to come to pre-K. We ended up with 5. A lot of that was uncertainty about what school was going to look like. Was it going to be hybrid? Were we going to be able to stay in all days? And that fluctuation was going to be very difficult for some of our youngest families. And they needed to find more settled daycare for this year. And so, we didn't have that influx. We just had 1 sort of come in. Also, there was a difference between folks who qualified last year and who didn't this year. There were 11 who didn't qualify this year. That's good. You see, things are working well, and so that's that's sort of a, hey, that's really good to hear. We did have 22 folks move away. There were a number of families that not either move away or went to homeschool because of COVID. And there were numbers of folks who were free and reduced in that list. And so all of that came together. And then once I learned that we had the lower amount, I went and sort of looked at our list and thought about our families and said, well, maybe they would have made it, or maybe them not. And even if I added in all of those, we only hit 42% in terms of free and reduced. So that was the budget hiccup that Nancy and I had at the end of our last meeting and then tried to resolve. And so I'll work through that piece through this cost center review. As I always do at the top, I just sort of put, that what's it going to cost in the end. So right at the top, you can see that through some of the budgeting work that Mark had mentioned in terms of trying to pull some additional items out that we were looking to have for this coming year, and some of the budget cutting that Nancy and I did. And I'll talk about each of those as I go through. Our budget going in is at in an increase in town appropriations is 0.9%. Budget to budget, it's 1.83, and that increase per 100,000 for that is $11.33. On carryover, there you'll notice sort of an increase there from the last time. We're proposing from the anticipated 561,000, 406,000, and saving out 100,000. In terms of, as you recall from the last budget, we were going to save about 150,000, but we put 50,000 back in to sort of help manage that difference as navigating the state subsidy piece. In the areas of regular education, what I ended up taking a look at was, some supplies. As you know, we have CRF funds, and we'll be looking at what we have left for those as we come through the budgeting season, and using some of that to sort of help support what we're doing now in terms of our needs. So I took a little bit there. Dues and fees, we have funds in our rural education grant that for professional development. So I look for some savings there, and some savings in our special academic programs.
Mike?
Yep.
Under your regular education, right under the box of state subsidy, because I don't know if you give this sheet out to anybody, you have their insurance as 8% and it's 18. I believe the teachers pay 18% and we pay 82.
That was a typo. Thank you.
That's what I figured, but I don't know if this was going out to anybody, so I want it to be right. Go
Thank you
ahead,
very much.
continue.
So you can see all the other numbers are similar to the last meeting, that we saw in terms of we have some money in there for the negotiated agreements. Mark had talked about asymptomatic testing, what the overall increases in regular education, but I was able to get close to $5,000 out of that line. In terms of regular education tuition to the high school, there is no longer, the state sent us their list for tuition for this year, and we took those numbers and the numbers of our students that we have going to Ellsworth High School, projecting going there, the number of students that we had projected going to MDI High School, and closely matched tuition with an increase to those numbers. And also I did sort of a deep dive because of the fact, if you remember last month, we sort of talked about how there was $160,000 in the tuition that we had that we weren't spending from last year, and why was that? And I talked about that last time. Part of that was, when it comes to our HCTC students, we pay a little bit less in terms of them going to HCTC. If they were full-time at Ellsworth High School, then we pay a little bit more. And with those students go to HCTC, we save some money there. So, and looking really closely at our tuition, Nancy and I found $32,000. And so we were able to shave that off with the for contingency going forward. As I have shared, I'll be looking carefully at those numbers because that, sways budgets quite a bit in terms of tuition. And so knowing if we have students who are moving out of town or moving into town, of trying to keep tabs on that as the billing cycle comes from the high school. In special education, K-8, I made some adjustments there in terms of not putting $10,000 into the reserve fund, and then was able to find a little bit in supplies for the $14,000. Actually, that is wrong too. It's $10,400 that we were able to save there. No changes in 9/12 special education. In terms of co-curricular and dues and fees, there are some savings there. About $2,500 is what I was able to save through there in terms of dues and fees, and some salary savings, and really taking a look at what we have for coaches now, what we thought if we were in a normal period, and looking forward. So that's where we had some savings there. In summer school, I was able to take the $10,000 out there. Julie Meltzer and I will be working on our grant to support summer school here. Kind of goes to what Alice was talking about. I mean, it's not full year school, but we're really looking at trying to do summer school a little bit differently. One of the things that we learned in terms of our sort of COVID summer school last year is those students who it more looked like an individual tutoring model, where there were a variety of teachers teaching kids for shorter periods of time, but targeted in certain areas of reading, writing, or math. And those kids that participated above 90% in terms of attendance, those kids did really well. And of course, I have to write a report for the state. And when I looked at attendance and what was going on, that really made a difference. And so in thinking forward, summer school will look a little bit differently, and maybe there'd be some of this tutoring model that I think will help support kids, in the gap that sort of Alice talked about in her earlier letter. So I was able to remove that. In library, out of books and periodicals, I took $1,000 from there. Technology, $500 in dues and fees. Again, I could use REAP funds to help support teachers. Office of the Principal, again, dues and fees, supplies and advertising came to about $2,000. And taking a look at the private transportation costs for the current students that we have, and thinking about the difference in distances, I was able to get a little bit closer to what those costs would be, so was able to save $2,000 there. And then in terms of food service, as you know, last year we took $8,000 out there. This year, we were going to put that back in. We received some grant funds, and so I felt comfortable taking $5,000 from that line. And so that brought us to our number of that you see on the bottom for this current budget, which is $4,339,586, which is a 1.83 increase. I'll stop there.
Anybody have any questions?
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure.
The COVID testing, does that not go through insurance, or did we not get COVID relief funds for that? I know that's in your budget, but is there a reason why that doesn't get run through insurance, or that you don't get funds for it?
Jennifer, do you want me to, I can easily respond. It's
Yes,
your call.
please.
So
Yes.
that's a great question, and we have applied for use of funds, CRF funds, and we were denied with that. But of course, as funds are available, we'll channel that through. But it's important. The distinction is this is asymptomatic, and so it's a different type of testing. It's not whether or not the individual has symptoms. It's to give us a gauge. And so for that reason, we're not able to channel that through. We did explore that. If we'll continue to look at the question, but right now we're funding that in the present year through donations, private donations, Bar Harbor Bank and Trust and others, some grants, and the support of the Jackson Laboratory and also MDI Hospital. That support that I just named, which is greatly appreciated, won't be there next year. And so we've planned for that. And that's an approximation. But that benchmark testing, we feel, is a very valuable tool, and we would not recommend against it. The hospital concurs, our nurses concur, our administrative team's on board. We have to plan for the dynamic that what school's going to be like, and we hope to expand upon what we're doing now next fall. But this is a resource that we believe is needed given where vaccines presently are, projections, variants, a lot of things that change daily. So in short, we're going to continue to explore using grants and other sources, but we have to budget this way and plan for the worst case scenario. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Mark.
Good plan. Thank you. I know that the testing should probably continue as we've done down at the lab. But I'm hoping that our governor will put something in place that will help reimburse you guys all for that.
I can continue on if there were no other questions about that part of the budget. As you know, from our first round, look through, there were 3 items under additional items. One being the nurse, one being taking a look at the roof, which involved 2 sections, both the library, which was needed, and above the south side of the 3-5 room if we were to do solar. Again, I'm starting to hear that feedback again, so I'm wondering if someone needs to mute their.
Oh, sorry.
Oh. Thanks. And then the other one that was in the last budget proposal was making our technology integrator a full-time position. And I explained, why that was needed in terms of not only the increase of technology that we're seeing within our schools, kindergarten through 8th grade, but the effective use of those and the role the integrator plays within the classroom, helping teachers and students maximize, the use of those materials. And so, as Mark had said, in working with the administrators across the district and looking at our elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds, that we could do that next year using those ESSER funds. And, I'd like to thank the other administrators for really, thinking deeply and working hard together and looking at the variety of things that we needed to do as a district, whether that was continuing with our virtual academy, which was, paramount in our ability to be 5 days a week with our kids. You can't beat that experience, not only for parents and the support that they receive, for whatever their choice was around having their child in school or having that option to keep their child home, or sending them to school. And it wouldn't be possible if we didn't have that. And so being able to work together and support that so that we can have our kids in school and parents feeling comfortable about, their children, I think was hugely important. And that took all of us working together to make that possible. So being able to have that supported through the ESSER funds, I think is hugely important. So if we're looking at doing the roof, and that could even get, depending on what the solar piece looks like, and I know that Mark may talk a little bit about that in terms of whether or not, there's a need for it to be part of the school with other things happening in town. That could even be shaved a little bit. But even if we were to go there, our grand total is the $4,439,586, which would be a total increase of 4.18%. And so, like we said, this is a process. And you could sort of see the changes as we go through the months before we get to our final budget. So.
Do you know the increase per 100 on that second number?
I would have to ask Nancy. Do you have that?
I can get that for you in a couple of minutes.
Okay, no problem.
Week out of here and I can do it.
Does anybody have any questions or comments based on what Mike had just brought up, the additional portion?
Well, Jennifer, I don't want to prolong this, but can I just add one quick thing?
Yes.
All right, and this may segue into, maybe I can save us some time. I hope I'm doing that, but while Nancy's researching that. So we're talking about the budget, we're talking about savings, we're talking about efficiencies, we're talking about solar power roofs, all that. I just want to put it on the table. I do not live in the good community of Trenton. I live in a neighboring community that has similar challenges, and we have challenges all across our member schools. But at the end of the day, I don't want to sound trite, but it all comes out of the same pair of pants, all of us. Whether we're talking, municipal, school, it's a community, and I recognize just from afar the needs of public safety, the fire department in Trenton, other needs, and I just see an opportunity, and I just hope we can work together. There's all kinds of ways. I think the school department, in terms of solar, we've demonstrated through the high school and other member schools that we see the benefits of it. I commend Mike and Mike Gilpatrick in terms of his advocacy for solar. But there's a lot of opportunities, but I think we have to balance that with the things that we have on the school side, as well as the needs of the town. And it just seems to me like there's this competing interest, and it would be fortunate if we could get down and sit together and try to navigate this for not just the short term, but midterm and long term. So, because these issues aren't going to go away, no matter who our elected officials are, our superintendents, our principals. So I think, I'll close by just saying, over the course of time, over the course of my nearly 40 years in this business, not just as an educator, but as a city councilor, and these are issues that are across our state. Doesn't matter, what our affiliations are. And if we don't work together, we're not going to be able to move forward. And Trenton is a great community, and there are opportunities for growth. And I think we just need to think about that. And I'm sorry to get on my soapbox, but I know that the challenges we're talking about right now in this budget in Trenton are very close in all of our member schools. They ebb and flow. And this is across the state, and it's not going to go away. And unless we sit down together and we look at this and we have continued conversations, we're not going to be able to move forward. So thanks. Nancy, I think I've given you enough time to get a number, right? You're muted, Nancy. Michael, I think Nancy has some audio issues, so.
Can you text me?
Tom has given you
Or write it on a piece of paper and hold it
Write
up.
it on a piece of paper.
There you go.
Okay, I can't see you. I lost you, but it can't.
I stalled for you, Nancy.
Well, it came out to like $43 and I think 92 cents for everything. It's
Yeah.
$11.33 for the 34,000, but then the other 100,000 adds, just compounds it, of course.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's what I got too, Nancy. So
That's good.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments on this portion of the budget before we move on? Okay, seeing none.
sorry, it was me.
Sorry.
I'm just slow on the trigger. Do
Go
we
ahead.
need to approve this month, or is it next month?
No.
No, not yet.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks. Yep. Okay, moving on to solar panels.
Can I share one quick thing that when I went through, and it's on my notes on the agenda, and part of the thing as we've been going through this process is talking about things that we could do together, and I kind of talked about it with the ESSER funds, but I kind of missed that. As an administrative team, we are looking at consolidating around a life skills program, a K-4 behavior program, and then an alternative ed program that might be sort of tied to a middle school or whatever. But there are two groups of us taking a look into, and when I mean us, I mean administrators looking at the possibilities, especially of the life skills or K-4 program, and whether or not we can consolidate some of those pieces within our district as a whole. And so, we are working on those diligently. It was something that the SCOC sort of brought up in terms of when you're an organization like this, that looking for efficiencies is something that you sort of need to do to be able to support not only you as a member, but the other members. So, that's something that over the next couple elementary principal meetings, we'll be talking about what the possibilities might be. So I wanted to make sure I shared that tonight before, we move forward. So we're looking at other areas.
Jennifer, may I just quickly add one thing on Michael's comment?
Yes.
Those conversations are extending throughout Hancock County with all of my colleagues, superintendents. We meet weekly, and I'm pleased to say the Commissioner of Education joins us and every other group of superintendents around the state weekly, but we're talking about these costs, how we can navigate special education and costs like that. So I want people to know that those conversations are active, but they're complex. They mean different things for different communities, but we're exploring all the options. Thank you.
Okay. Is that it, Mike?
Yep.
All right. Solar power. Mark, you want to take that?
Absolutely. Yes, Jen, thank you. So the short answer is there's a lot of positive news about solar. I think both the citizens, the select board, the school board, everybody recognizes the benefits of doing this. And so how do we accomplish the hurdle? There's the piece about the roof that will get resolved, and whether or not it's the physicality of having panels on the roof, and that's a great thing. We've done that at our high school, but there are other ways. And I'm not suggesting we don't do it at the school or any other public facility. That Tremont's an example. The Tremont Consolidated School, we're part of a solar initiative with the town, but it's part of a landfill. And so it's off the school, but we're benefiting from that. And I'm not suggesting that's the way to go for the school, but there is a path forward. And so we've had conversations with a lot of vendors, and I'd like to invite maybe a short presentation at our next meeting in terms of how the board and the town may consider navigating that. I think it's important to ultimately, solar or not, get that roof done. It's how we get it done. There's no question about that. I don't have any questions about the benefits of solar, both for sustainability, our environment, but just cost savings. I mean, the projections are pretty clear. That's why we went down that road at the high school. And the numbers are staggering in terms of it's the right thing to do for the environment, no question. But it's also, it's a cost savings. It's, I hate to say it, but a no-brainer. So we ought to try to replicate that, I believe, in Trenton, but in all of our schools. So I hope to be able to bring somebody and the next month, if it's convenient for the board and the individual, just to talk about some options to consider. And this is a vendor that we've worked in the past. It doesn't lock anybody into anything. Of course, if there were to be any things, it would have to be RFPs and all that. But I just think it's important to hear from some of the professionals in the industry in terms of what the options are. So that's my update on that piece, Jennifer, and please take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't see any.
Okay. I don't see any either. Thank you. Other business? I don't have any.
I don't have any, Jennifer. And I'm not aware, I checked in with Selena, I'm not aware of any additional public comment, but if there is any, we'll forward it to you and it can be provided for the next meeting.
Okay. And Mike, did you get copies of the 2 letters that I read for public comment earlier so that you can have it for your record?
Yes.
Okay. Next regular meeting is Tuesday, March 9th at 4:30. Future agenda items, budget.
Budget and solar presentation.
Yep. I don't have anything at the moment. And if nobody has anything else, I would take a motion for adjournment.
So moved, Gary.
Second, Tom.
All those in favor? Gary,
Approve.
Tom,
Yes.
Aaron,
Approve.